FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
Can you imagine Ronald Reagan sitting there and saying, oh, by the way, I can't do this because of some budget document, or George W. Bush saying, you know, I'm not going to invade Iraq because I can't get the aircraft carriers I need, or even Bill Clinton saying, you know, I'm not going to attack Saddam Hussein's intelligence headquarters as he did when Clinton was president because of some budget document. Under the Constitution, the president is commander-in-chief and employs the force. And so we now have the president going out because of this piece of paper and this agreement. I can't do what I need to do to protect the country. That's a kind of madness that I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, it does sound, especially when you consider that it's not a cut. We're just slowing spending. But is this the administration playing Connect Four? I would say checkers, but that's even more generous than I wanted to be. Are they playing Connect Four with the military? And how accurate is Bob Woodward for the answer to this question? Of course, Stephen Yates is the foreign policy expert with DC International Advisory, DCadvisory.org. He also advised former VP Dick Cheney. Stephen, good afternoon to you. It's like days of our DC.
Happy to talk to you again, Dana.
Of course, absolutely. I'm glad that you're on with us today, and thanks for joining us twice in 1 week. I appreciate it. Bob Woodward's claims here, because there's discussion that the president withheld deployment of an aircraft carrier, or there's like all of these different claims going around that he's withheld this or this deployment or that deployment, and used sequestration as an excuse for this. How accurate are those claims?
Well, I think it's accurate in terms of what the tactics are that the White House has been trying to employ. They basically have been choosing essentially the equivalent of hostages that they think will grab the greatest amount of attention and move opinion essentially against the House of Representatives. They seem to talk completely past the U.S. Senate, which is another important body in this discussion. But I think what Woodward said is essentially accurate. He, of course, politically is not my favorite journalist. He has a point of view, but what he's saying is that it is going a bit too far in playing a relatively cheap political game, and then you take it onto the world stage because there's more of an audience than just your political friends and foes at home. You're sending a signal of weakness to Iran. You're sending a signal that we won't be able to address other issues, say like a North Korean nuclear breakout. And so there's a wider audience that I think this irresponsibility reaches a new level.
Yeah, and is this due to just the administration, the president is naive, or you would think with so many advisors helping him that they would make a better decision, or they just, he doesn't have to worry about re-election. He doesn't care if he can use whatever fear-mongering scare tactics to get his end goal, then he'll do that. I mean, is it a combo of both?
My sense is it's sort of a war room mentality that may or may not directly involve the president in all of its machinations, but there's a bubble mentality in the White House to begin with, and there's sort of this war room mentality about political advisors, press points, and stuff like that, and they don't get enough sensible eyes and ears into the conversation, I think, from time to time. They get caught up in their own emotion, and they mistake a verbal battle in D.C. as being somehow defining the existence of the republic, when what they're doing is they're playing with toys that affect the real survival of our republic. So I think it really is sort of advisors run amok in many, many ways, and that's who actually had allegedly bullied Woodward and others, for that matter. The president picks up on the points they create, and so he's involved in the process, but I tend to see this as sort of the cowboy fraternity brother mentality of the bubble inside the White House.
We hear from the administration that sequestration, we're just going to see trillions, and the military will be decimated, and that's what's going to happen as a result of these evil Republicans. Stephen, how is sequestration going to actually affect the military?
Well, my guess is that we'll talk again next week or the week after that, and we will have roughly little unchanged in the reality of our nation over the course of that time period, and we will cross the Great Rubicon called sequestration at that point. But unfortunately, you had it exactly right in the lead-up. we're not even talking about cuts. We're talking about slowing the rate of growth. We're not talking about smartly managing programs, revitalizing our force, recalibrating our mission, and things like that when it comes to the defense budget. And we're not really talking about taking care of the massive spending that's on autopilot. That's what's truly eating up the solvency of our nation. So I just think that this is a giant theater exercise. Unfortunately, there might be some important programs hit and some really bad decisions made about pausing certain deployments for political purposes and things like that. But when it comes down to it, we're still spending a great deal of money on the largest government on the planet.
The release of these illegal immigrants yesterday, many of whom some law enforcement had said, well, no, actually some of them are violent offenders. In the discussion about national security, Eric Holder's fear-mongering, saying, well, the sequester is going to make you all less safe. We have a lot of homegrown domestic terrorist problems and, so on and so forth. And then the release of these illegal immigrants would seem to kind of it seems contradictory to what Holder was saying, especially when we had the stories just 2 years ago of Hezbollah being active north in Mexico. But I've heard too, Stephen, that illegal immigrants are also released every single day, and that this isn't as big of a deal as the White House pretended it to be. Which one is it?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, all of which are slightly depressing, I'd say. I mean, one is what Eric Holder is saying in a shorter form is we are very inept, and if you fund us less, we will be even more inept. So we are going to let illegal immigrants go, and then some of them may in fact be violent. I don't doubt that happens, but to sort of threaten it as part of a negotiation that we'll do even more of a bad thing if you don't pay us more is really, I just think, outrageous. And in the context of all of these cheap tricks that they're playing, I think it leaves out of the window of possibility that this is just by mistake, that someone is misspeaking or there's just these errors in judgment popping up here or there. It makes it look deliberate. Whether it is or it isn't, I think that they are, in fact, painting that picture clearly for more people. It's just, I think, grossly irresponsible. There is a national security mandate to comb over who's coming and going in our country, and we'd certainly like to believe that our responsible officials would hold on to the people who might be a threat to the public, but my goodness, apparently that's not the cabinet's mandate under the current environment.
I just, I'm looking at the tactics coming from the White House yesterday. They're trumping, or they're beating the drum. Oh, we're releasing these illegal immigrants, and then here we have the Bob Woodward story of he was being bullied, and Lanny Davis, and so on and so forth. These are stories, Stephen, that I'm used to seeing where it concerns Russian government or government in Venezuela or China. The fact that this president is using tactics that, well, Hussein did the same thing with releasing criminals in Iraq, and we've seen Castro with the press, and we've seen Chinese government with the press, and so on and so forth, and Chavez. This is, I don't know. What do you make of this? Because to me, it just seems like it's all too much all at once.
Well, I agree, and it's basically if you took them all separately, you can dismiss them or put them in a different kind of context or otherwise sort of get past them. But when you have 4 or 5 of these kinds of things happening at once in very different parts of the government, then I think it's just inescapable. You have to say, well, this is just a little too much to be coincidence. What in the world is going on? And we're not necessarily saying that the government of the United States is the government of these other places, but the people in office are behaving in ways that are like that.
Wow.
And it's having a chilling effect on dissent, tough questions in the press. It's having a chilling effect on our lawmakers getting things done that are their job to do. And so it is a giant power grab. It's a power grab by browbeating people in public and trying to squeeze leverage points in negotiations.
And you advised Dick Cheney on matters of foreign policy. I don't remember at any point during the Bush administration individuals in that administration being photographed with their fingers in the faces of other people, or the Bush administration attempting to go after not one but handfuls of reporters who dared to report anything about the policies coming forth economically or militarily.
Well, the Bush administration certainly was on the receiving end of a great deal of tough questions and criticism and scrutiny. And we had some tough political battles. I mean, it seems like eons ago, but when the Senate was divided 50-50 and Jeffords was shifting, I mean, sure, there were some tough words exchanged and opinions exchanged. You didn't have this kind of a bully approach. And frankly, George W. Bush is just a very different kind of person that way. In the end, he believed in sort of dignity and respect for differences and stuff like that. His cartoon image to the public may have been different, but he would never behave in this way, and he wouldn't have tolerated others.
Right.
My former boss had a colorful word to share from time to time when a political adversary would give him a cheap shot. I think that was well covered. It begins with F, and whatever. But there, beyond that kind of stuff, there wasn't this orchestrated enemies list and sort of control effort over political dissent or trying to shut off tough questions from the press. No one likes to receive them, but I don't think anyone could produce evidence of a press secretary or press operation that this aggressively went after the media.
Yeah, I completely agree. Stephen Yates, D.C. International Advisory. Always a pleasure, Stephen. Thanks for joining us twice in 1 week. I know we've been taking up some of your time, so I appreciate it.
No worries. Always happy to do so.
Thanks
you,
so
Dana.
much. Talk soon.